And we're live. Just give it a few minutes, a few seconds, really. Hello. All right, taking my sip of water. Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome to the latest installment of Geek Speaks Greek. I am your geek, George O'Connor, speaking English to you, but about Greek mythology. If you've never seen an episode of this before, each episode I talk about a different personage from Greek mythology, be they goddess, god, hero, or monster. And if you're joining us this week for the first time, you're in the middle of Redo Week. See, back when I first started doing this, like, I don't know, 500 years ago when the quarantine began, I was doing this to benefit my local independent bookstore, Word Books. They have a location here in Brooklyn, another one across the river in Jersey. And I didn't really know what I was doing yet, technologically. You'll see now. I mean, this is the lowest tech, high-tech show in the world. But the first two episodes were just completely lost. I thought I saved them. Turns out I didn't save them. And so this whole week, I've been redoing the people, the gods that I did that first week. I had led off with Apollo, because we're kind of living in Apollo's time as the god of plagues and healing and stuff like that. He was the first episode, and we did him on Monday. I also covered his son, Asclepius. Asclepius doesn't fit in. I'm only doing 3 episodes a week. I'll schedule in a new Asclepius somewhere later. On Wednesday, we did Apollo's half-brother, Hermes, my personal favorite god, and he was the star of the second episode that was lost. And then today, we're doing Hermes' son, Pan, hence my accoutrement. So before I get too far into that, though, I wanted to kind of, if you've never seen before, it's a very active group of people who watch, who send in a lot of artwork. In fact, if you decide that you are a person who wishes to send in some artwork, you should send it to my email at georgeoconnorBooks@gmail.com. And if you're just somebody who's joining us the first time, you want to catch up on some old episodes, they're all archived except for those first 2, but now I'm redoing them, so there's no more excuses. It's up at my YouTube at youtube.com/user/GeorgeOlympians. Now, let's get into looking at some of the stuff you guys sent me. So, sorry about this. All right. It's okay. I hit the wrong button. First up, from Eleanor, here is a picture of the star of Wednesday's show, Hermes, and his wand, the Caduceus. This is all great. I really enjoy Eleanor's artwork. Like, I always remark on the vitality and energy of it. Like, she just goes at it. And that's like, you could see every single minute. And that's a great Caduceus. It's probably better than the one I actually drew on Wednesday. Thank you so much, Eleanor. Now, this is from Yehi, and she has sent us a couple, she does a lot of comics. I keep threatening I'm going to put them up online. One of these days I will. But then she also sends a lot of some, like, these amazing, amazing pieces of art. So here we have a picture of he looks bemused, perplexed, perhaps annoyed Apollo, because Dionysus is handing the masks of tragedy and comedy to the goddess, to the muses of comedy and tragedy, because that was also symbols of him as well. And so Apollo's kind of like, what are you doing? Like, that's not really your job. And there's also kind of like a little bit of rivalry between Apollo and Dionysus. Just ask Carl Jung about that. So it's a really cute little bit there. I like this drawing a lot. And then she sent me this one. So if you were tuning in on Wednesday, for pretty much the first time ever, I drew a picture of an adult Hermes without his helmet on. You only get to see his eyes once as an adult in the entire Olympian series. You see him quite extensively as a child without his helmet on. But you never get a picture of his eyes, his hair, and all that. So I just kind of drew a picture live. And then Yehi drew this, which is this, just be prepared. Look how cute this is. This is Papa Hermes. He's put his helmet, his winged helmet, on little baby Pan, star of today's show. And he's just kind of swinging him around. And this is just so sweet and cute. I'm like, I love this. This is, as far as I'm concerned, this is an official thing that happens in Olympians. Like, this is definitely happening. That's just so cute. I love this. Yeah, you're an incredible artist. Like, you're going to have my job one day. Now, this one is from Addie. And Addie drew a Pan. And there was a little bit of a note that went with this. I like that people are drawing Pan in advance of Pan actually appearing, which is kind of cool. Addie wrote, I don't normally draw boys, but I made an exception here. And she added freckles because it reminds her of the spots that like a baby, fawn has, which is really clever. And also, I just wanted to tell you, because I think like Addie's able to read my mind. There's a scene in the upcoming Dionysus where Dionysus's first love is the satyr, not a Pan, but he's a satyr named Amphilos. And I drew Amphilos with freckles. And boy, this is a little bit of spoilers. But there's a scene where Dionysus is looking for Amphilos in the underworld, and he's like, have you seen this like satyr? He's got like really cute, he's got freckles and such. So the idea of satyrs with freckles, that's something that it's been on my mind, and it's been on Addie's mind too. So I think we're probably having a synchronicity moment. Now also, this is also pretty funny. So we have another person who won't draw boys who made the exception here. This is from Moira. Moira, I think I have to hold it. I'll hold it this way, but I think it's going to turn. Moira is really great at doing these entire scenes, and her father recorded that she doesn't normally draw boys, but she did draw Hermes here. So I guess, I'm glad to see her both branching out, drawing boys. I mean, they're gods. They're boy gods. That's okay. You could do that. And then finally, today, I'm going to draw some, I am going to draw, but I'm going to share some, what I thought were some pretty adorable pieces of artwork from Megan, who has written in a few times. Another one in anticipation of today, here is Pan, and I'm guessing this is probably Syrinx, like he's kind of got her dress a little bit caught on his horn, and he's all smitten, and she's like, hairy goat boy. That's a really cute one. Here's one. And I interpreted these as 2 in a row. So I don't know if this is like, here's Aphrodite kind of being a little risque there. And she's distracting Hermes as he flies by. And then you turn the next drawing. There's Athena and Hera talking as Hermes just flies right into a column. So I'm enjoying this. I enjoy some good physical humor. I like to see that. Thank you very much, Megan, for those drawings. So today, we're going to talk about Pan. Clearly, I'm a bit of a fan. I want to talk about the horns. I first got these horns. There used to be this great comic book store that I miss all the time here in New York City, in Brooklyn, called Bergen Street Comics. And I used to do like launches for all of my books when they would first come out. I would do a signing there. And I think it was pretty early on. It might have even been like the first, like Zeus or Athena, but I feel like it might have been Hera. When that book came out years ago, I dressed up for the first time. Even though he hadn't appeared in the series yet, I dressed up as Pan for that. And I used to look more like Pan. I didn't have a full beard. I was a little bit smaller. That's a big spoiler. When I draw Pan, I'm just drawing myself. I don't have glasses on. I do have goat horns, and I have a little chin dangle instead of a full beard. But Pan is just basically me. I associate with Pan. Out of all the gods, even though, like I always say, like Hermes is my favorite, Hermes is way cooler than I could be. But a guy who's half goat, I could maybe almost be that cool. So I feel like I really relate to Pan. So Pan, let's see. Let's give some facts about Pan. Pan was, he is the god of, like, wild places. He's the god of, like, shepherds. He's the god of hunting. He's the god of fertility. He's god of mountains and fields and valleys, like all the wild places and stuff. God of wild animals. And you may notice as I'm talking about these, pretty much everything he's a god of overlaps with another god. And honestly, overlaps with a more famous and more powerful god. And I'm going to get back to that. That's an interesting thing about Pan that comes up a lot. Where Pan hits a lot of spots that other gods have got covered. It's interesting. I don't know. So his Roman name was Faunus, but Pan is, he is the son of Hermes. I should mention that. Most versions of it, he is the son of Hermes and Penelope. Not Penelope, the wife of Odysseus, although a few sources do kind of seem to get confused and say that. This is another Penelope. She's a nymph. And the most traditional version of the story is, Hermes gets her pregnant, and she has this baby, and she gives birth, and she's freaked out. Or in some cases, it's the nurse that runs away. They're like, ah! And Hermes comes down, you know, because he's running around doing a million jobs at once. And he sees this baby. And he's delighted. Because Hermes is a trickster. Because this little baby, I'm going to draw the little baby. Because, you know, whenever I have a chance to draw a baby Olympian, people seem to love it. And I do actually draw baby Pan at several points in the book. So, you know, start off drawing like he's really cute. He's got these big brown eyes. And, you know, like all babies, he's got like a kind of lost look on his face. He's got like a little tiny nose and a little bit of a smile. And he's probably drooling on himself because he doesn't, you know, he's a baby. He doesn't know what he's doing yet. And let's give him like some big fat cheeks. And let's give him some pointy ears. A little, not super pointy. That's a little weird though, right? It looks like Bat Boy or something. And then let's give him some little goat horns. Now we're getting into some weird territory. He's got curly hair. And let's give him his fat little body, because, you know, the fatter a baby, the cuter. This is a very fat baby. And then, of course, like all babies, we'll give him his little tiny goat legs. Wait, what? Yeah, that's, okay. I feel like, all right, so let's just put ourselves into Penelope's shoes for a little bit, or sandals, I guess. So she's been with Hermes. They're dating, whatever. She's probably used to some pretty weird stuff because he's a prankster. He's always going to be doing stuff. And when the baby, you know, is born, she's probably like, oh, ears, pretty weird. Horns, oh, glad they're not pointy. Goat feet, oh, forget it. And then she loses it, right? Hermes is delighted. And as the story goes, he scoops up his baby and he races him to Mount Olympus, where he is just so excited to show off, like, look at this weird baby I made. Look how cool this baby is. And all the Olympians, in the story goes, they're all kind of like, yeah, this is a cool baby. And I really like this story because sometimes the Olympians are big jerks. A lot of the times the Olympians are big jerks. But in this story, they kind of are very accepting of someone who's very different, like this fat little goat baby, right? And I like that. And this is a story that came a little bit later in the history of Pan, because Pan in Greek means all, everything, right? Like a pantheon, all the gods. So this god named Pan, the ancient Greeks were like, well, there must be a reason he was everything and all. And it's weird because he's not everything. He's like half man, half goat. He's actually two halves, right? Or half god, half goat. But they decided he was called everything, like all, because everyone loved him. And that's a really nice message, right? Now, modern scholarship has decided. So, you know, I talk about this a lot, the idea that like we tend to think like ancient times were just like unchanging, like it was just like everyone believed in this certain stuff until they one day didn't. But beliefs are always changing and languages are changing, and people believed in these gods for thousands of years, right? So their ideas about them changed. And we're pretty sure now that it's actually not anything to do with that later story where his name meant everything. It was a name, it was, I think it's like pao, it was like it was an ancient Greek verb that meant like rustic or like to be something like country, which makes a lot of sense. He's a very country god. And my personal theory, even, as a son of Hermes, we know Hermes starts off as a god of like sheep, shepherds and flocks and such. And then Hermes kind of like moves up to the big time, right? He like literally, if you watch the Wednesday episode, the dude has more jobs than you could count. I had to write a list and I still left off a few because I realized afterwards. So like he's the most busy Olympian. And we see this a lot with the Olympians. As they grow more and more popular, they absorb other gods. They absorb other gods' functions. And I almost feel like that early aspect of Hermes, as the shepherd, as the protector of flocks and sheep and things like that, was passed off to his son. They come from the same region. They come from Arcadia. And there's even a lot of parallels. So Hermes' mom was Maya. She was the daughter of Atlas, the Titan. And his dad was Zeus. And just like Zeus, Hermes was born in a cave and raised in secrecy to protect him from the enemies of Zeus. And then, just like his father and his grandfather, Pan was also born in a cave. So there's this kind of like tradition, this like down the familial line, like born in a cave. Well, he's in Arcadia. He's got a lot in common with his dad that way. But it's like an echo, isn't it? He's like echoing his father. His father is echoing Zeus. And that's the interesting thing. Like I was mentioning up front, how the things that he is the god of, a lot of those things are overlapping with other gods. So like right off the bat, the shepherd stuff, that's kind of Hermes' bag. And I still think, even though he like clearly looks the part, I think Hermes was more closely related to that. Like the idea, like he's the protector of shepherds. You know, that was his big thing. He's like the protector of wild places and hunters. That's Artemis's bag. Like that's the stuff she does. What else? Oh, fertility. I mean, that's Aphrodite. All these things. There are other gods who, more big gods, like Olympians proper. He's not. He could go up to Olympus. He's not an Olympian. He definitely lives in the wilds of Arcadia. So, you know, because the Olympian actually is determined by your address. That's why Hades isn't one, because he doesn't live there. Pan is not an Olympian. He is a great god, though. He's considered one of the great gods. He's very powerful. But he's kind of like this weird... This is going to sound harsh, but he's almost a little redundant. Like in that he doesn't really have an aspect of his that he covers that isn't covered by a more well-known Olympian, which is just kind of interesting. And that echo, that follows through to most of his famous myths. So when I got to tell his story, he's mostly told, he's made a few appearances here and there, but his biggest starring role is in my book Hermes, where you can actually see he's a cover guy. By the way, that's totally me without a beard and with, like, you know, abs, because I don't have abs. And my legs are actually hairier than that in real life, but... So, I tell the big story in there how he plays this very key role in helping the defeat and leading to the defeat of Typhon, which I've told the story elsewhere here today, like so, and I'll probably do an episode just on Typhon because I love Typhon so much. I love that story. I feel like I've told it on this show like 3 or 4 times, so I'm not gonna get into that today. But then if you move back past that, so Pan has a lot of stories, but they're all kind of weird echoes of other stories starring other gods. So, first one that comes up. Oh, I'm going to make a plug for my website, okay? So, there is the story we told in Apollo. There is the story of Apollo and Marsyas. In brief, Marsyas was a satyr who looked a lot like, well, you know, he was an adult. I should probably draw a picture of Pan at some point, huh? Marsyas was a satyr who got a double flute called Dionysus, and he played it, and he was so pleased with the sound that he remarked aloud, "Boy, I'm a great musician, greater even than Apollo." And Apollo, who is very easy to offend, hears this and challenges Marsyas to a contest. And he's like, if you win, you get anything you want from me. And Apollo's a god. He's an Olympian. He could do anything. So Marsyas is like, okay, cool. And of course he loses because Apollo's a god. He's an Olympian. He could do anything. But what Marsyas unfortunately did was ask, what does he have to pay if he loses? And Apollo skins him alive. Now, there is a very similar story where there's a music contest between Apollo and Pan. Now, Pan is a god. Pan is the son of Hermes. Hermes is beloved by Apollo. Also, Apollo's like his uncle. He's not going to cut off Pan's skin. He probably couldn't anyway because of the whole god thing. They're immortal, right? More on that later. So, in this version of the story, Pan, his symbol... I'm going to draw Pan while I'm talking. So, Pan... Here's the eyebrows. One of Pan's symbols is his pan flute. It's still an instrument, and people still call it a pan flute. Whereas Marsyas had 2 flutes, Pan has, like, it's made of these reeds, and there's, like, maybe, like, 5 or 6 reeds of different length tied together. Let's give him some hands here. Hear my cats knocking stuff over in the background? It's fun having cats. Each of these little reeds plays a different tune because of its length, and Pan was famous for playing this. So he's playing the panpipes. Apollo's playing his lyre, made for him by Pan's dad, Hermes, right? And in this story, they actually choose a judge, and the judge is King Midas. Now, even if you know nothing at all about Greek mythology, like almost nothing at all, you probably know who King Midas is because of his golden touch. This is another story of King Midas. And if you want to see, this is kind of like the lost stories of Olympus, of Olympians. So maybe you're a big fan. Maybe you're one of those people who claims you're my biggest fan. Maybe you have all my books. If you do, cool, great. If you don't even, cool, great. I don't care. I'm happy for anybody to read any of my books at all. So this book, I did a story of this. And you can get this story. It's digital only. If you write in to go to my website, georgeoconnorbooks.com. I'll say it again, georgeoconnorbooks.com. I'll try writing it backwards a little bit. And just go and send, like, add your name to the mailing list. You get sent automatically this exclusive Olympian story, available only here. The story of the music contest between Pan and Apollo. That's only part of it. They both play their music, and King Midas, he chooses Pan. He's like, yeah, I like Pan better. I think Pan's music is better. And Apollo's like, what? Which is like, man, I don't know. How do you get into that position? If you're ever in a position where you have to judge between anything with gods, just like, I don't know, go turn yourself into a tree. It's not going to end well no matter what. So, you know, Pan's like, he's like, cool, he does a little jig. But Apollo's like, he's the god of music. He can't take this slight. Although he's also a god of music. But he's rustic music. Apollo's like classical music. He can't do anything to Pan. So in this story, he takes his revenge on Midas. And he gives Midas the ears of a donkey, of an ass. Because he's like, you're an ass? You're getting the ears of an ass. And so Midas, you know, Golden Touch Midas, he has these donkey ears. And there's more to the story of that. It ties in with a bunch of things. I'm going to leave it for that. But that story, as I got super sidetracked, is a complete echo of the Marsyas and Apollo story, right? So then, talking about his panpipes, there's the story of Pan and Syrinx, which I mentioned her briefly because Megan drew a picture of her. Syrinx was a nymph, and I'm going to finish drawing this while I'm talking. And Pan, let's say he loved her. Let's say he was running after her for sure. Maybe we'll give him the benefit of saying it was love, right? And he was like, I love you, I love you. And she's like, ew, get away from me, goat boy. Or maybe she was enjoying him just playing around, who knows. But he chases her and chases her and chases her. And finally, to escape him, she prays to Mother Earth and is transformed into reeds. And then Pan takes those reeds, cuts them off at 6 different lengths, 5 different lengths, whatever, wraps them together, and he makes his pan flute from it. And, like, okay, I don't like that story because it's, like, messed up for many reasons. But also, that is a complete echo of the story of Apollo and Daphne. Same thing. A god is not taking no for an answer and chases after a nymph. And the nymph, in fact, both of versions, this nymph is pledged to Artemis. They're like, no, we want to, like, we pledge to Artemis. That means no boys. Get away from us. Ew. And doesn't matter. And they chase her until her only chance is to pray to Mother Earth or another deity and be transformed into vegetable matter. And then it was still alive, but like a plant. Big difference in quality of life between being a plant and being a nymph, right? And then the god collects parts of them. Apollo takes parts of Daphne and makes his wreath out of her. He makes an instrument out of her. He could be blowing on her fingers. When I told this story in Hermes, because it is so exactly the same story, I gave it a little twist. And the twist was that she actually is just messing with his head. She actually isn't really reeds, and he's kind of, you could kind of guess that he's knowing it too. And he plays this, oh, cats are fighting now. He plays this really nice music on the thing, and she actually is like, kind of like, in the story, she's like, oh, I kind of feel bad. Like, maybe he had more going on for him than I realized. But again, that's a story we already know with Apollo and Daphne, and that's a much more well-known story. And then, I mean, I keep using the word Echo, right? He even plays a part in the story of the nymph Echo. Do you guys know Echo? Man, this is one, she probably should get her whole episode one day. Echo was a nymph who was famous for being a real blabbermouth. She was like a real me. She just kept talking. And so Zeus, we all know Zeus, worst husband in the world, right? Zeus was always, having affairs, running around on Hera. And he kind of had entrusted Echo with this really important job. Where Echo's job was whenever Hera would come around on Earth looking for Zeus, Echo would pop up and be like, oh, hey, Hera, how you doing? What's the weather like? Blah, 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 blah. And Hera would be like, yeah. And she would be distracted and like she didn't want to be rude, so she'd be stuck talking like these pointless conversations with Echo. And then one day she finally catches on what's happening. That this is Echo running interference for Zeus. So Zeus can run around and have affairs. So Hera, again, typical story, the gods don't take it on each other because they can't. She curses this goddess, this nymph with who has the gift of gab. She curses Echo that Echo can only repeat the last thing said to her. This is where we get the word echo from. It's pretty cool. So, oh, my cats are really having a fight. Stop, guys. And then, in some versions of this story, Like, so that's why she gets cursed, right? And then there's different versions. Sometimes she's like Echo's in love with Narcissus, who's in love with himself. It's all very sad. But there are versions of this story where then like Pan is in love with Echo. And like he's always pursuing her, and like it's just weird. Like it's like, again, he's an adjunct to like this much more famous story. There is one cute version in, well, it's actually, have you ever heard, there's a book called, it's by Apelius. It's like the earliest novel. I think it's the only novel we have saved from Roman times, called The Golden Ass. And there's a little, like, it's this guy, Lucius, who gets turned into a donkey when a spell goes wrong and, like, wanders around. And kind of like, it's like a travelogue, and he encounters other myths. It's going to be a source for when I finally do Eros and Psyche, because it's a really great version of that. But there's a little bit where you actually see, like, there's Pan and Echo, and they're together, and Pan just teaches her how to sing. Like, he sings songs and she sings back as like a chorus. I'm like, oh, they finally made it work out. But again, just a weird echo of a story that, like, he's in. So Pan, like, super interesting character with this, right? Like, and maybe it says something interesting to me that I relate to the guy whose stories are all very kind of weirdly derivative of other stories, or at least echoes. I'll use that term again. There's a couple things that really make Pan stand out. When I first talked about him, when I did him in the first episode, I really focused on his role in Panic. It was in the early days of the quarantine. People were scared. We didn't know it was coming. I mean, we still don't know it's coming. But the word panic is derived from Pan. And Pan has this special ability. So he's, I mentioned all the things he's the god of, and he makes music and things like this. But Pan had this ability to make this yell. And this was a yell of, like, I'm trying to think of a word that would be opposite. Like, baseless terror. Okay, I'm like, how do I say this without saying panic? He would make a scream. And this scream would fill people with unreasoning, baseless terror. They'd be like, oh, they'd lose it. And that's what panic was. And he would bring panic, and he could bring it onto battlefields, or, like, if somebody, like, really lost it, it was thought a panic was visiting them. So this is really kind of, that's an interesting aspect of him. And the other interesting aspect of Pan, talked a lot about gods being immortal and can't taking revenge on each other. Pan is the only god about whom there's a story where he dies. Yeah, like, it's weird. It's a really weird story, because it's not a myth. It's actually recorded as part of a history. Like, this is literally recorded as an actual historic event. So this happens in the Common Era, maybe about, like, CE 20 or so. It's early on, and this is written by Plutarch. And he's writing a history, and he records that there was this sailor named Tammuz, I think is how it's pronounced. And Tammuz is on a boat when he hears a divine voice call to him across the water. And the voice says, "The great god Pan is dead." And he hears this, and he goes and reports to the shore. And he tells people, like, he reports widely that the great god Pan died. And we don't know how, we don't know why, but there's some interesting stuff about it. So, okay, I said about 20 CE, the Common Era. Some people say it's more like 30 Common Era. It's a little bit hard. Plutarch was writing a little bit later. But it kind of jives up with the dawn of Christianity. Now, Christianity was not yet the dominant religion it was. It was just a little fluky thing happening off in one little corner of the Roman Empire. But it is interesting that the idea that as that comes about, and this is something that the early Christian writers, they called them apologists, would actually spotlight on, that the idea that, like, he was being held up because his name was Pan, in all, like the pantheon, he's being held up as representative of the Olympians. And eventually, the widespread belief in the Olympian gods does come about as Christianity, because Christianity, so pantheon, all the gods, they believe in all the gods. And if you believe in different gods, it's cool. We have room for more gods. Christianity has always been like, no, there's only one God, and if you believe in another God, you're wrong. And eventually, that attitude, because those are very incompatible, like, eventually that attitude precludes the existence of other gods in the Roman Empire when it comes to the Holy Roman Empire. And takes a few hundred years after this, like 300 or 400 years, for, like, it's really to die out. But eventually it does. So that's kind of interesting, right? And what's even more interesting, remember I said this is treated as history? Like, other people have written, like, they treat this like it's something that absolutely happened. Robert Graves, who I don't mention much, he was a, I'll call him a modern era mythographer. He worked in the early part of the 1900s. He recorded and retold myths. He was very well known for it, but he takes a lot of liberties. He's not somebody I tend to use too much. But he actually worked out a whole theory how somebody was actually yelling to Tammuz, the sailor, being like, somebody else is dead, and he misheard it and was across the water. It's this crazy thing. It's like they're all just assuming, like, yeah, this voice really happened. Anyway, I kind of love it, even though it does seem to hint that Pan, one of my favorite gods, died. And as far as we know about Olympians, I mean, I always stress this, they cannot die. It's kind of one of their features. In fact, one of the stories that he figures really prominently into, the defeat of Typhon, involves like Zeus being horribly mutilated and imprisoned in a really weird way because you can't kill him. Because it would have been easier to kill Zeus, but they can't do this. So it's kind of a fascinating thing to have happened. I should mention, it's not like worship of Pan stopped right around then. Like Pausanias, he's like 100 years later, and he travels around Greece. He's another historian, and he records many different accounts of Pan worship still going on. So maybe this whole thing, the great god Pan is dead, was just somebody mishearing it. Maybe just a weird fluke. But anyway, I think it's kind of a fascinating story. I don't know. So, let me see. I wrote some really rough notes here. Did I have anything I left off? No. I think I kind of got it. So this is the time when I would normally throw this open for some Q&A. I don't know if people have started yet, but if you have, let me see your questions. Rick Riordan had an interesting play on Pan's death. He kind of just faded away. Sparksfly writes that. I wonder, so because a lot of people have written in here talking about the idea that the gods need worship in order to live, which, like, I have said, like, that's not anything that actually exists in the actual original mythological canon, but it is, oh, sorry if I spoiled. Yeah, Sparksfly, jeez. That's not something that existed in the original belief systems, but I feel like a lot of modern authors have come up with that idea. And did Rick Riordan do that? Is that a thing? If like nobody believes in the gods, they don't have powers anymore? I'm just going to draw another Pan while I'm waiting for other questions to pop up. Pan is a super fun guy to draw. It's like the top half of him is kind of like drawing Dionysus. He's just like, you know, he's a kind of slender but muscular guy. And you get to put him in like ridiculous poses. Like, I'm going to make him yelling, so he's cupping his hand. There's the chin dangle, which I realized I had to draw this again because I didn't draw his chin dangle. Because that's kind of like, you know, like a billy goat. And I used to, like, for years, I had a chin dangle. This beard thing, it's like maybe the last 2 or 3 years. I was just a guy who had just like a weird little goat thing hanging off my face. I looked kind of like a goat. Yay about the comic that got cut up from the book. So it wasn't even... I think you're in reference to my story of, I was just telling about the comic that you could get on my website, which that reminds me, I'm going to write my website here in a little bit. It was never cut from a book. It was a bonus. I actually did it originally for, it was a giveaway comic on Free Comic Book Day. For what year, I can't remember, which would have been like this weekend, I think. Free Comic Book Day, so weird. But afterwards, I made it available on my website, so it's something you can read. I think there's a couple of Olympian stories that have appeared elsewhere. I told a really kind of brief story of Ariadne that appeared on another Free Comic Book Day. And then I have 4 Hermes stories that appear in a Fables collection. And that's the only place to get them. I should make like a checklist where people can find it. So there's like a Pan. All right, I'm going to try to write my website backwards so you can see it, all right? George... Oh, I don't have enough room. O'Connor. It's all one word. I think I did it. I always have trouble with the ends. Oof, what happened there? Oh. It's George O'Connor Books, guys, and that's a .com. So close. And then I guess I don't know what happened there. All right. Let's see. Did goatee come from Pan? Oh, I don't think so. I think because the word that wouldn't have been the ancient Greek word for goat. That was I think it was krios was Greek word for, but that isn't goatee comes from because you look like a goat. Now Pan looks like a goat too, so that makes a lot of sense. Jitterbug Perfume has my favorite take on Pan's death. Not for the kids, but high school plus should read it. That's a cool recommendation. I started reading that book like years ago. I never finished it, but if it had Pan in it, I knew that. Who are Pan's kids? So depending on, there's no like specific kids that are 100% agreed on as being the offspring of Pan. It's not like we're like the Hermes, we're like, that's his kid. And like, there's a few different stories. Man, I'm gonna blank on their names. I think there's this one bit of text I can think of specifically where I think they mentioned him having 2 daughters. Sometimes in ancient art you would see there were these characters called the Panes, and it was like 3 Pans, and those kids were like, hey kids, that's like means goat, like baby goats. They were held to be like the offspring of Pan in some instances, or sometimes they were there instead of Pan. It's a little bit weird. And then there's also Egepan, who is like, that's like, some people think that's actually Pan. Some people think it's a different being, maybe like a child or something. So according to Sparksfly collaborated, if what they represent goes away, the god fades away. So maybe because Pan is such a god who everything is kind of redundant, maybe he didn't have enough of a hold on those things, because like, you know, we still have wilderness, not enough, but like that's Artemis's job, and we still, you know, there's fertility, and that's Aphrodite's, and, you know, shepherds. I mean, in New Zealand there's more sheep than people, so they're still doing okay. How many days apart are Artemis and Apollo? So they are twins, so let's say their conception was presumably at the same time, but there's a remarkably long distance between when they were born, right? And I think in my books, the version I went with, there's different accounts. I think I went with 11 days. 11's a number you'll see pop up quite a bit. Like the Titanomachy was 11 years. It was a number that had some importance. But it's like 11 full days that like poor Leto, she'd already given birth to one baby, and then like the other one just wouldn't come out. I wonder if they actually have like a specific birthday assigned. Hi, Mike Morris. More like nature wasn't being cared for anymore, causing Pan to fade. Okay, that's very interesting. I mean, we definitely need to you know, do a better job watching after the environment. Once I read a version where Pan and Echo had a daughter. I think she was called Lynx. Yeah, there is a version where it's Pan and Echo had a daughter. I don't remember it being Lynx, or maybe that's Enix. I actually remembered it being something with either an N or an I, but so maybe it is Lynx. Maybe it was Enix. Maybe it's Enix. I don't know. Somebody who's got access to an online thing can check that out. Who were Syrinx's parents? Renka, I actually don't know. I think she was just a nymph, and that doesn't mean she didn't have parentage, but I'm sure because the Greeks were very good at making these like, you know, familial histories that went down, I'm sure there was someone. I don't know if she has any particularly well-known parents. Like the way Daphne is a nymph, but like her father was like the god of the nearby river, which I'm blanking on right now. I don't know that Syrinx had that same level of pedigree where it was actually laid out. That's something I'm going to have to actually, you know, take a look at and see for later. Any other questions? Oh, nice Pan picture. Thank you. Okay, we're actually not getting a lot of questions today. So, this might be one of those shorter episodes. This actually might be the shortest episode I've ever had, though. Interesting. Pan, all the questions, none of the answers, or the opposite. Did Pan hang out with Dionysus? Yes, especially in art. You will most often see him, like even more so than you see him pictured with his father. He's normally pictured as part of Dionysus's retinue. And I feel like they're probably about the same age. They're kind of like the junior members of the Olympians, maybe the representative of the next generation. You know, maybe Hermes caps off to the second generation and Dionysus is the third. And like his kid would be like, you know, like Pan would be part of the third generation. I'm just kind of spitballing here. But yeah, they often did hang out. He's a party guy. I mean, my horns, I would wear these horns back in the day when we would go out and do stuff. I would wear these horns out quite a bit. Like if I was going to a party, I'd wear the horns a lot because it just, something about having goat horns just makes you feel like you're ready to get down and party. More likely to sing and dance and yell and cry, panic and things. Oh, somebody answered, like, what's his town? And then somebody said Arcadia. Arcadia was like an entire region. But yeah, that was his thing. He's definitely not a god of towns. You wouldn't likely see him in a city. And like even his temples, they would be like, they wouldn't be temples. They would be like altars in like a wilderness spot. Or maybe even like an interesting natural phenomena that he was associated with. He was not a city god. But Arcadia is the seat of his cult. It was where he had the most worshippers. It's where he was believed to have come from. And it was a very rustic place. Like, you know, there's a whole expression, there's a type of painting called Arcadian landscapes, where it's just these beautiful, fanciful landscapes, and that's the realm he comes from. I've heard really old versions of Dionysus did have horns. Is this true? Yeah, there is a whole version. In fact, you're going to see a little bit of spoilers in Dionysus. I pay a little homage to that, where like there are some variations of the story where Dionysus himself has horns. I don't want to end up talking too much about Dionysus because this is Pan's episode, but I'm going to do some Dionysus talking. Dionysus is really interesting. And there's a lot of really mutable elements of his character. Like, he is actually raised... he has several different childhoods. You know, first he's... You know, there's the whole story with him and Semele, where he is, like... His mother is incinerated, and his father, Zeus, takes, like, the little nubbins that's going to be a baby one day, and sews it into his leg. So he comes to term in Zeus's thigh. And then from there, he is spirited away when Zeus gives birth out of his leg, which is, like, the weirdest thing ever. Hermes spirits him away to his mother's sister, this woman named Ino. And when he's living with Ino, he's a girl. He's raised as a girl, but he's a shapeshifter. It makes a lot of sense that he would just straight up be a girl. So she's a girl. We don't really know what, like, so like pretty much in my take on it, my vision, Dionysus is, you know, they are very mutable of gender. And they start out as a woman. And then, when that goes bad, which I'll get into that someday, Hermes spirits this child away from Ino, well, from Ino's body, and takes the child to live with Silenus, the satyr. And in doing that, he rescues the child. He has to transform and disguise himself. Hermes takes on his familiar guise as a shepherd, and then Dionysus takes on the form of a sheep. So that's like the explanation for how he has horns sometimes, like just hiding under his hair. And you'll see it sometimes in artwork, especially like on vase paintings. Actually, I've seen some sculptures too, where he has a full set of horns, just like grape leaves and stuff on it. Is it weird that the mother of Dionysus is the grandmother of Ares, and she had an affair with Zeus? So... The grandmother of Ares. So you spelt Ares as the astrological sign rather than the Greek god of war. So I'm trying to think mythologically, because Ares' mother is Hera, and his dad, I'm talking the god of war, and his dad is Zeus. Ares, the goat, is, I don't actually, so whatever that's a reference to, Mrs. Molly P. Oh, no, that's not the one who said that. That's Sive Q Lama. I actually don't know. So Semele is the grandmother of Ares the goat? Is that... You know, that's one of those things I would love for you to... let me flash the email. If there is a specific story that you know that one, please send it to me here. Just a link. You don't have to write it up or anything. You can find something online. Because I would like to know that. Because I didn't know that connection between Ares the goat and Semele. That's very interesting to know. Somebody writes, I love Dionysus. Is a Dionysus book coming? Yeah, I'm literally, like, as soon as I finish this, I go back in my studio, the next room over, and I'm working on Dionysus now. I'll probably do a Dionysus episode pretty soon, where I get a chance, and I'll, like, show you some of the artwork that I'm working on, tell you a little bit of the story. Actually, I told you a lot of the story earlier today. You know about the horns, you know about stuff like that. Yeah, Dionysus is going to be the 12th and final volume of Olympians. Ranka adds, maybe panic comes from goats screaming like on YouTube. Now that is a super interesting idea. Like, because, like, yeah, why does this goat guy, why does he have this otherwise kind of weird power that's not really super explained? But yeah, goats do make upsetting noises. Except for peacocks, maybe the most upsetting noises in the animal kingdom. So, like, just think of, so there's some, like, goat farmer in ancient Greece in the middle of Arcadia, and, like, there's wolves and lions and all kinds of stuff out there, and his goat's going like, meow, and he's like, oh my god, like, he's just, his nerves are shot, and he's like, it's Pan. Pan's doing it. I like that idea. Ranka, I subscribe to that theory. Oh man, granddaughter. Semele is the daughter of Harmonia, who is the daughter of Ares. Ah, yes, okay, yes. So Harmonia is the daughter of Ares and Aphrodite. And yeah, I believe Semele is the granddaughter. Yeah, I mean, if you get into that stuff, it all gets really weird. Like, you know, like there's the whole one with, I mentioned this a lot, with Heracles. His grandpa is Perseus. His dad is Zeus. And on his mom's side, his grandpa is Perseus. Perseus is also the son of Zeus. So it's like, it's just weird. I always say the gods don't really have genes the way we do, so they don't really, it wouldn't be as gross as if, like, say that was, like, my grandpa and my dad. You know, that'd be, like, a lot worse, and also I'd probably look funnier. How many children does Zeus have? Woof. I don't think there's a definitive answer. So, Greek mythology is vast. There's so many stories. And, like, it's kind of cool. I've been doing this series for, like, a decade now. I'm still uncovering stories that are new to me. And it's something that I feel like there's enough stuff that survived to us that, like, I could probably spend the rest of my life reading Greek mythology and still find new things. And so many of those stories involve children of Zeus. And, like, so, here, this is a little visual demonstration. Hermes is not my most recent book, but it was my second most recent book. And, you know, all my books have these family trees on the inside, which get more and more comically complicated. Like in Zeus, the first book, it's pretty chill. Just look at all the lines. This is Zeus. I mean, you can't really read anything, but just look at the visual. All the lines leading from him. And this is by no means. I'm basically only concerned with, like, the major, like, god children. Because Zeus has billions of demigod children. Billions might be a little bit much. He has hundreds of demigod children. And it's ludicrous. This could be a weird question. I already love it. But do you think Dionysus' grapes on his head are edible? Yes. Yes, I do think they are. I think he literally wakes up in the morning, kind of like checks his hair, makes a few vines grow in his head, takes one off, tastes it, maybe makes it ferment in his hand really quick so he gets a little buzz, start first thing in the morning. Yeah, absolutely. That'd be funny if he, like, he's this Olympian, he's near all powerful, and he makes, like, rubber grapes on his head. Nah, like, those are definitely edible. I think you shouldn't, if you meet Dionysus, I don't think you should grab one off his head. He is the god of madness. He'll probably make you go crazy for it. I'm sure he's done something to the grapes. Just in general, that there'll be some weird myth about it where, like, you end up, like, marrying your dog or something. It'll be weird. Can I expound upon the connection between fauns, satyrs, and Pan? So you would actually think that there is, like, a direct connection, that Pan is, like, the forebear of them, but he's not normally actually, like, listed as being, I think maybe because of his status as one of the later gods. He's the son of Hermes. Hermes is the second youngest Olympian. That's pretty well established. So by virtue of that, he's got to come along pretty late in the line, right? So the satyrs, gosh, there's a few different creation stories about them, and I might be mixing this up with, like, the centaurs, where I'm gonna have to do some research on that one because I've read it, but I'm gonna conflate those other things. It's definitely, like, there's a story I think where, like, there is a goddess and a cloud, and there's some sort of funny business that happens there, and the satyrs are born. That might be centaurs though, but the connection, I feel, is mostly coincidental in their appearance. And because I'm that sort of person, I've actually made a little bit of an artistic thing to demonstrate this. There's a couple things that physically represent my drawing of Pan that distinguish him from my drawings of satyrs. So Pan has the curved goat ram horns. Whenever I draw satyrs, I'll just draw it right here. I give them, like, these kind of straight horns. Another difference, and this is actually, I maybe have mentioned this elsewhere. Let me just finish this guy's face. They have a little bit more aquiline features too, a little bit thinner for the most part. Their ears are bigger. So like that's like a traditional satyr face. Another difference that I will do, because they have goat legs and stuff, I draw the satyrs with body hair. And Pan doesn't. At least above, you know, he's got a lot of, right at the waistline, tons of body hair. He does no pants on. But he doesn't have chest hair, he doesn't have armpit hair, he doesn't have arm hair. He doesn't have all the hair that really marks a physical being. Because, as we know, Olympians are not really human looking. Their true form is like balls of energy, right? So they assume the human form. And I just kind of, as like just a thing I established in the series, which I don't really mention to anybody, but I mentioned here maybe once before, the Olympians don't have body hair because they're not actually descended from animals with hair like we are. They're doing an imitation of. So they do this very kind of perfect idealized version, and maybe the details aren't 100% all there. So he, because his body, he's kind of like, my take on him is he's always gonna be trapped between two forms. Like when he transforms into a fish, he's like a half goat, half fish. His top half is like a god's top half. So he's like perfectly cut and he's in amazing shape. He looks great. He can grate cheese on his abs and he has no body hair at all. But if you look at my satyrs, they're always pretty woolly because they're half goat. It's not necessary. This is me. I grew up reading Marvel comics. I like to put little pseudoscience in with my fantasy. Little Cereal asks, what are you going to do after Olympians is done? I am going to do a 4-book series on Norse mythology called Asgardians. And after that is finished, my plan is actually I want to come back and do more Greek mythology books. I mentioned before when I was just talking about The Golden Ass by Opelius. Like, that's a really good retelling of the story of Eros and Psyche is in there. And it's one of the sources I'm already getting ready for because I want to do an Eros and Psyche book. And I want to do all these stories that tie into, like, Greek mythology but aren't so Olympian-centric. And I was just saying, like, how there's so many stories about Zeus. I could read a new story every year. Like, I want to do a new book every year. After I finish Asgardians, I think the plan is I'm going to do a new Greek mythology book every year. Well, I do other projects, too. And just telling other stories. So one day, when I finally die at, like, let's hope 300, there'll be like a whole volume. You have your 12-volume Olympians, and maybe there'll be like another 12-volume of stories adjunct to the Olympians, you know, associated with other gods and such. So it writes, wait, peacock makes scary noises? Yeah. On YouTube, check it out. It's really weird. Like, it's just like this, oh, no, it's really weird. It's out of my range. It's not what you expect. Like, you're like, peacocks, they're so pretty. But, like, they make terrible noises. Oh, yeah. So, actually, you mentioned Eros and Psyche. Would that be included in Dionysus, or should we watch it elsewhere? So, Eros and Psyche was originally going to be part, and I did a lot of research and sketches and even laid it out, but a very truncated version. It was originally going to be jammed into Aphrodite, and it didn't work. It was, she's in it, but she's not really the main character of that. She kind of plays a bad guy, and it didn't jive with the whole thesis of what I was trying to do with that book. So I had to cut it. That's happened a few times. Another story I would return to and do is Orpheus and Eurydice. Again, Orpheus and Eurydice in early drafts of Hades, they were in there as well. But again, it just took too much time away from... The series is called Olympians, so it's got to be about those big gods. And there are times, like Heracles, we spend a lot of time with Heracles in the story of Hera, but that's because Hera is so entwined there, and she's really guiding him through that whole thing. It was a prism to see more about Hera by seeing Heracles. We spend a lot of time with Theseus in Poseidon, the same thing. You learn a lot about Poseidon by learning about Theseus. You learn a lot about Hera by learning about Heracles. Eros and Psyche, Orpheus and Eurydice, I don't think you learn about Hades and Persephone as much from Orpheus and Eurydice. At least not anything you couldn't learn from the original abduction story. Eros and Psyche, you learn a lot about Eros, but I don't know, Aphrodite kind of comes off bad in that one, and she already had enough stuff she had to overcome in that story. So I'm going to tell those stories where I have more room to tell them too. I had to tell those stories if they were going to fit in those books like in 5 pages. You can't do Eros and Psyche in 5 pages. It's madness. It would just be like reading a Cliff Notes version. And why would you want to do that? The grandmother was a typo somewhere. Okay. You look like Mark from the comic saga when he wears glasses. Oh, yeah. Wait, does he have a beard, though? I don't know. Now I don't look like Mark, right? Oh, my, I look weird without the glasses. Infinity. That's how many children Zeus had. I agree with that. Let's see. So we're pretty close to where we'd cut off. Oh, could you tell us the myth Dionysus doesn't approve of beer, if possible? Okay, I will. I don't remember who wrote it, because there's various versions of this. But there was a king of, it's either Boeotia or Thrace named King Lycurgus. And in some versions of the story, Lycurgus is somebody, when Dionysus is spreading his mission, when he has decided he is going to become an Olympian, you know, because he comes from different stock. This is a whole thing. He's a different sort of god, like I said. And he makes this big following on Earth. And he creates literally an army of, like, satyrs and, like, drunk people and all these worshippers. And he marches across the land. And when he comes to... And he creates... It's important to notice about Dionysus. He uproots norms. That's his whole thing. Like, whatever the status quo is in a town, in a society, in a culture... Dionysus comes with his madness and his drunkenness and his wild ways and just the stuff he brings with him, he uproots it. And he comes to the domain of King Lycurgus, whatever it is. And Lycurgus is like, you're not coming in here. And normally, and honestly, it's the version I'm telling of Dionysus, he doesn't want him in there because he's like, I'm a very calm and sober gentleman. My people are calm and sober. We don't need this crazy guy coming in and make everything crazy. But in some versions of the story, the reason why he doesn't want them in is because he's a beer drinker. He's like, we don't want wine because we drink beer. And they're like, oh, they all have like kegs and like beer steins, like, ew. And then, I mean, what happens to him is pretty brutal. Most versions of the story, Dionysus puts a madness on him, and he has like a big axe, right? And he's just like, he thinks he's fighting with Dionysus, and he's like just cutting down these vines because Dionysus is making these vines come up, and like they're grabbing his armies and fighting his family, and he snaps out of the madness, or Dionysus makes him snap out of the madness. And in some versions, those vines were his family. Ugh. And in some versions, the vines were his own legs. Like he's sitting there cutting down a tree, and it's his own legs. That's the one I used. I'm telling you guys so much about Dionysus. This is crazy. So I think... All right, wow, there was a lot more questions. But the thing cuts off in 3 minutes, so I'm going to have to end this today. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Now we have finished Redo Week. So I'll come back. I was actually, if you do artwork of your own and would like to send it in to me, please send it to me at email, georgeoconnorbooks@gmail.com. I really love seeing what you guys do. You guys are so talented. It's just really amazing. It makes me really happy to see that, like, my love for Greek mythology is at least in some small way helping other people love Greek mythology too, because it's the coolest stories in the world. If you missed an episode or you want to catch this one again or any other episode, you can go to my YouTube, youtube.com/user/GeorgeOlympians. I had thought of what I was going to do next week, and now I forgot. So I don't know. If you have a suggestion, write to me. Tell me what you would like to see me do. I'm going to do another week. It's Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I have a few ideas. I don't remember what they are, though. So this was really fun. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and I'll see you all hopefully Monday. All right, bye-bye.